Welcome parents to Hamilton High School's Parent Presentation Series. We started these parent presentations about 4 years ago because we saw there was a need to provide some support services to parents in our community and within our school. These parent presentations provide a wide range of topics. We have expert speakers that talk about social media, communication, mental health issues, all the areas that teens are going through, and to educate parents on what they can do, resources they can obtain, and just support services. We also have a student educational series at the same time in the evening, so you can bring your child with you and they will go to a separate classroom and they will get education on the same topic. Most teachers give extra credit, but your child will always get 2 volunteer hours for every session they attend. And at Hamilton, we also have support groups that the social workers run. We have support groups for anxiety, depression, and self-harm. We have groups for grief, substance abuse, anger management, and we also provide one-on-one support to students, as well as meet with parents if there's issues you might be struggling with and need some professional guidance. You can come and meet with us. And so at Hamilton, we provide a great deal of services. Please contact us if you need any additional support, or we can sit down and talk about ways that we can help you and your child be successful during these high school years. Thank you so much for coming to our presentations, and these presentations, as you can see, are videotaped and will be available 2 weeks after every presentation, along with the PowerPoint and any other materials. We will have them on our website. So thank you and have a great day.
How's everybody tonight? Exhausted after a long hot day? Everyone's tired? What my experience in this is that the parents that come to these things aren't the ones that really need to hear it. You know, you broadcast that this information is coming out, and all of the good, attentive parents show up, and they are the ones that generally don't have too much problem with these kind of things. And the kids who are causing mayhem out there, their parents aren't here tonight. So I applaud you for being here. Just a little bit about myself, just so you know why you might even want to tune in and listen to what I'm saying tonight. I became a cop in 2002. I worked for the Scottsdale Police Department for 12 years. Did the patrol officer thing, driving around midnights, looking for bad guys, answering 911 calls, did that for a couple of years. And then I got recruited into the school resource unit. And you guys are probably familiar. I know Officer Quinn, Kevin Quinn was the school resource officer here for many years. He and I are very well acquainted, knew each other for many years, go way back. And that was my foray into social media chaos. As a fairly young cop, a father with a few kids, none of them junior high or high school age yet at that point. In 2004 was when the chaos really started. Right? And I'm not going to talk about MySpace tonight because that would be ridiculous, but that's where it all started. In 2004, these kids, for the first time, more than half of the student body is showing up to school with phones that back then were dumb phones, but they had the ability to take videos and pictures and message those things, MMS. And then they could, of course, get on their computers and do social networking using MySpace. That was the big thing. We were all trying to figure out what this whole thing was all about. Well, obviously, since that time, things have escalated dramatically. I'm not a naysayer. I'm not a doomsdayist. I'm not one of these cops that's going to come up here and tell you that the whole world is going to hell and your kids are all going to perish in fiery, flames of misery. I think technology is great. The only problem with technology is it usually doesn't work when you need it to. So we'll see how it goes tonight. But there are definitely some pitfalls. There are definitely some things that I, as a school resource officer for, I was there for about 4 years on a middle school and a high school campus, back and forth. Saw kids getting into all kinds of trouble, as you're aware of, and it was all around MySpace. And then a year or two later, it was Facebook, and then a year or two later, it was Snapchat, and then Instagram and Twitter, and still Snapchat. And so there's a lot of these apps that are out there that you're aware of. They're household names. Who here has a Facebook account? Okay, and you all know, I'm sure, that you are now officially old, because only old people use Facebook. The kids don't use it. But in our effort to be hip and young and cool, who here has a Snapchat account? Excellent, excellent. I encourage every single one of you to get a Snapchat account. Not only is it hilarious and a lot of fun, but it's a good way to engage with your kids and model proper social media behavior for your children using Snapchat. Now, if you had heard my presentation 5 years ago or 6 years ago, I'd have said, don't let your kids use Snapchat. It's horrible. They're and we'll talk about it because it still has the potential to be very damaging. But it's not going away. And in spite of our best efforts to warn people, every kid has a Snapchat. So therefore, I have to say, if you don't have a Snapchat, you are missing out on an opportunity to engage with your kids. Let's see. A couple more things about me. I love talking about myself, can't you tell? From the school resource unit, I was recruited into the investigations division, where I spent the next 6 years doing computer crimes investigations, a lot of those involving youth. In fact, 80% of my caseload was surrounding the sexual exploitation of children. I'm a computer forensic examiner, and that's what we did. We would find bad guys who were downloading known illegal images and videos. We'd write a search warrant. The judge would sign off on it. We'd go to their house, kick in their door, arrest them, take their computers, take it back to the lab, and go through their computers and find the evidence of exploitation of children. And it's harrowing, let me tell you. I mean, after 5.5 years of looking at the most disgusting stuff that you could possibly imagine involving children and animals and sleazeballs, and I'll try not to be moralistic at any time here, but it offended me. It was hard to look at day after day after day. So about 2013, I got a call from the Attorney General's office, and they said, are you Detective Griffiths? I said, depends, who's asking? And they said, well, we read this report you did on a fraud case, and it's a really great report, and have you ever thought about working for the Attorney General's office as a special agent? I said, no. Do you guys do child porn investigations? And he says, no, we don't. I'm sorry. I said, no, it's good. I'm in. So I left Scottsdale PD. After 6 years of that, I was ready for a change. And so I did 2.5 years down at the Attorney General's office investigating white-collar crimes. And as exciting as that was, sitting at a computer looking at bank statements for 8 hours a day for 14 months, when my now adult son decided that he was going to quit his job as a video editor and start freelancing and doing it full time, I decided that sounds way more fun than looking at bank records. So I quit my job, and I'm now self-unemployed with my son as a multimedia production company. I still volunteer once a month down at the Attorney General's office and assist them with computer crimes and things like that. So that's my background. Oh, I have 6 kids. The youngest is 11. Yeah, I know. We didn't know what was causing it till it was too late. But my youngest is 11 now, and my oldest is 21, almost 22. And that's exhausting. I haven't slept in 22 years. Those of you that have kids know exactly what I'm talking about, right? And I assume you all have kids or you wouldn't be here. And so I'm in the trenches with you trying to figure this out. Even though it started with MySpace in 2004, I've tried to stay as current as I can because my kids are using all of this stuff. And so I try to stay relevant. That being said, I bet you all know of an app that I've never heard of. I probably everyone in this room can ask me a question about some app and I'll be like, I don't know. But I hopefully will have some resources to help you find answers. So the last thing I have to say before we go any further is my wife always insists that I give this disclaimer. Apparently I have a very bad sense of humor. And by that I mean 2 things. 1, according to my wife, I'm not funny. And number 2, I can occasionally be come across a little jaded, maybe a little bit cynical, sometimes a little off color, a little irreverent even, possibly. Definitely not politically correct. And so I'm just apologizing up front if I say anything that offends. And I want you to know that I hold no ill will or malice towards any individual, group, race, religion, ethnicity, cultural background, age, sex, orientation, any other protected group. I pretty much hate everybody equally, right? So that's probably comes from 14 years of being a cop, but that's, so if you'll afford me a little latitude and forgive me if I slip up and say something colorful, I will afford you the same opportunity to just express yourself, ask questions, honestly and directly, and there's no topics off limits here tonight. Please feel free to ask very direct questions, and I will do my best to answer them very directly. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about cyberbullying at some point tonight. I usually do that at the beginning of my presentation, but there's another presenter coming in about a week, a dynamic duo, Brooke Barr and Kevin Quinn, who have great presentations on bullying, but maybe I'll be able to set the stage. I have a hard time not talking about exploitation on the internet and in social media without addressing social aggression, because they're really closely related, and often one leads to another. Okay, so this is what I maybe will end the presentation with tonight, is self-defense and how to talk to your kids about protecting themselves physically, because if they get the right mindset physically to protect themselves, they're going to be much better at protecting themselves emotionally and mentally when it comes to social media. So that's just my philosophy, and there's a lot of people that disagree with my opinions on this, and you may be one of them, and I respect that. So anyway, let's see. So right now we'd like to get into the discussion about sexual predation and how it happens. Those of you who are of the male persuasion, and I'm going to do some gender stereotyping, and so you have to forgive me up front. What I'm about to say doesn't hold true all the time. I recognize that. But generally speaking, here's my observation with males. They tend to be visually stimulated in all areas of life. I'm not just talking about sexuality, but they tend to be visually stimulated. They're spatially oriented. They're movement oriented, action oriented, and that's just the male brain. And if you heard Katie McPherson speak on gender learning and the research that's being done there, you know what I'm talking about. If not, I suggest you catch one of her presentations sometime. So that's men. For obvious reasons, visually depicted sexual activity appeals to most men, and that starts about age 10, give or take, right? And that's really normal development. Developmentally speaking, boys start to become very curious about sex at about age 10. And anything that's visually oriented is going to attract their curiosity and their attention. Okay, so that's really normal for boys. Now, for girls, guess what? At that age, it holds pretty true for them as well. Now, they're not as cognitively or in terms of their brain structure and their brain chemistry, not wired exactly the same way as boys. And so it doesn't trigger often in the exact same way, but there's a lot of hormones raging in 10, 11, 12, 13-year-old girls as well as boys, and so they are easily exploited through their curiosity. Right? Think back to when you were 12 or 13 and ask yourself this question: was I curious about sex? Yeah, of course. If you weren't, you were what we call a late bloomer. It didn't come until later. Or you're a very small percentage of the population that's just kind of asexual. They're just kind of ambivalent towards sexuality. But that's a very small percentage. Most of the population is really interested in sex once they hit puberty, and very visually stimulated at this age. Okay, so I think I'm probably just saying stupid stuff that everyone's like, yeah, go on, we know this, get on with it. Well, thank goodness I didn't have a cell phone with a camera when I was 13, right? Because you can explore yourself or your peers very easily without a whole lot of face-to-face accountability or interaction. And this is where parents need to have really open, honest, direct conversations with their teens about sexting. And I'm not talking about it from necessarily a moralistic perspective. I'm just talking about it. Right? You may believe that pornography and sexting and masturbation are morally wrong, and if that's your views, then I respect that. But if you're more empirical and more secular in your thinking, I respect that as well. And I think you can make the argument that sexting is very dangerous without even going to morality or religion or anything like that. I think we can make a very solid case that exploring prematurely below your maturity level in sexual areas can lead to lifelong trauma and emotional difficulty. So sexting is happening. It's all over the place. It's rampant. It's the norm these days because probably 7 out of 10 kids has a smartphone by the time they're 12, and they're curious about sex, and they've got all the access in the world to it. That leads to child pornography, which leads to adult pornography, which leads to luring potentially, and stalking and other sexual exploitation crimes. So we're going to kind of walk through this a little bit here. Some of the apps that are particularly used for sexting is Snapchat is the big one. Everyone's familiar with Snapchat. Is there anybody, I don't want to shame anybody, but is there anybody who's not heard of Snapchat? So, blatantly designed to assist kids in sexting. Blatantly designed by male college students to help their female peers and younger feel safe sexting, right? So there's really no hiding it. And then there's, of course, Tumblr, which is sort of like the seedy version of Facebook. Kik and Whisper and of course then there's just Hangouts and what's the Apple Messenger one? What's it called? I'm not an Apple guy, I forget what it's called. But anyway, Kik is the one I'd be really cognitive of and cognizant of. It's Kik and Whisper are two apps that you need to get in your head and do some investigating on because they are texting apps and they're multimedia messaging apps that allow the transmission of video and pictures and sound and everything. And they are anonymizers, which means they don't store any of the communication and they don't store any of the contacts. And the contacts that they do store are through some kind of a proxy server that masks the original identity of the person generally, right? So that's why pedophiles and sexual predators really like kids who use Kik and Whisper. And other apps like that. I'm serious, there's probably a dozen more being used out there regularly by teens because you maybe strict and you don't allow your kids to have messaging services that are unregulated or unsupervised. Well, they can download these apps and they can use them over Wi-Fi and they can do all the same thing that they can under your supervision, only now it's anonymized. So that's one of the things that we want to be aware of. Pedophiles, why do they love that? Yeah, it's really hard to trace the pedophiles through these apps. Unless the circumstances are just right, which they often are. Through a lot of extra work, we can seize the phone, we can seize the app, we can preserve the information that's there forensically, and then we can write a court order that to the app service, right, whether it's Whisper or Kik or whatever, and we can demand or request that they give us the logs for the originating IP for this communication, and then we get that from them after a couple of weeks. And now we've got an IP address. So we have to go do a whois search, find out which carrier owns that IP address, and then we have to write another court order to that carrier, like Cox Communications or CenturyLink or whoever, wherever they are around the country, and we have to ask for who was the subscriber on your network that used this IP address on this date and this time, and they'll send us their subscriber account information. And now we got to go to that person's place of residence physically and hope it's not a Starbucks. right? And we can start then watching and looking. And so can we catch bad guys? Yes. Is there a trail? Yes. Does it often lead to a dead end? Yeah, it does. Yeah. So that's why law enforcement is really frustrated with anonymizers like Kik and Whisper. Down here are the three very common live streaming apps, and there are many more now. This is over a year old, this presentation, but Meerkat, Periscope, and Livestream, where they can now of course Facebook does it now, of course, too. If they use Facebook, you can live stream on Facebook. And so all kinds of things where they can do live streaming and engage them with their peers in a sexual way, okay? So, yeah, sorry, we'll get through that. What is that? Legally, what makes something sexting as opposed to child pornography, transmission of harmful material to a minor? What's the difference legally? Does anybody know? So, if you as an adult obtain or acquire an image of a minor in a sexual environment or a sexual circumstance, and you have or transmit that, that's a felony. And in Arizona, we're very strict. You can literally get up to 10 years of prison time for every one image. They generally don't prosecute to that full extent, but that's what the law says in Arizona. So we can, if we find a bad guy that's got 1,000 images of children, sexually exploited children on his hard drive or his phone, then once we prove it, he goes to jail for a very, very, very long time. That's what that means, right? So up until 2010, we didn't have any differentiation between child pornography, exploitation of children, and sexting. So a 14-year-old sending a nudie to another 14-year-old fell under the same statute, and we didn't know what to do with it because we're not going to put a child in prison for 20 years. That's silly. So the legislator came up with this statute up here, which basically says if a juvenile sends a nudie to another juvenile or a sexually explicit image of themselves to another, that it's a petty offense the first time. Yeah, question?
Every state has different laws.
That's right. Every state has different laws. Arizona has some of the strictest laws for adult on child exploitation scenarios and fairly lenient for children to children, minor to minor. Okay, so and again, when I was a school resource officer in 2005 to 2008, I was mortified when I had 5 kids in 1 year come into my office. 5 little girls came in and explained to me that they were being sexually exploited by one of their peers because they sent a naked selfie to somebody. I was, oh my gosh, this is horrible, what's going on? And a couple of years ago, I told the school resource officer who was at the school where I worked, I said, yeah, I couldn't believe I had 5 in 1 year. And he just smacked me. He's like, you're an idiot. We get like 5 a month easy. Now, 1 a week without fail, and often more than 1 a week where kids are being bullied and harassed as sort of what we've heard the term in the media, revenge porn. Right, where you take a naked selfie and send it to your significant other, your boyfriend or your girlfriend, and after that relationship goes south, it kind of sours over time, as it always does in junior high, right? Now your partner is going to share your most intimate, most exposed and vulnerable picture to the whole school. Right, yeah, and also, of course, there's a stigma with boys about their manhood or the size of their manhood. There are stigmas for women about, their promiscuity, and depending on which, culture or subculture you're in, it may be more or less severe. But children are being completely devastated because they don't have the prefrontal cortex, they don't have the forward-thinking ability to realize that if I take a picture of my hoo-ha and send it to my boyfriend, that in 2 weeks he's going to send it to all of his friends. Right? They don't have that ability to think ahead. Boys certainly don't have that ability to think ahead. And so they're being harassed, bullied, and traumatized by their peers due to their sexual exploration. When I talk to my kids about this, I'm sure to tell them, You're a sexual person. I get it. You're human, right? You have a penis or a vagina. Welcome to adulthood. Here we go, okay? Are you curious about it? Good for you, right? Do you want to, learn about it? Talk to me or your mom. We're happy to tell you everything we know, which, isn't much. We've only got 6 kids, but we'll talk to you about it, right? What I don't want you to do is take pictures of yourselves and send and receive from your friends, because that leads to really bad consequences down the road. And explain those consequences as we've just talked about here tonight. So that's one of the strategies, because the school resource officers these days, they don't give warnings, just so you know. Most schools have a zero tolerance policy on sexting. If kids are found to be sexting and transmitting images of themselves, officers don't give warnings, because kids don't learn from warnings, they've discovered. They started off giving warnings, and the kids aren't learning from the warnings. And so they're writing them tickets every time. And now the kid's got to go to juvie court and appear before a judge with a petty offense. It's not a criminal record at this point, unless they do something really egregious, like intentionally pass it on to everybody else. But just, the more kind of innocuous or innocent sexting, I guess, if there is such a thing, get a ticket, go to court, stand in front of the judge, tell him why you did it, and then pay a fine, get some community service, go to a class. So there's consequences that go along with that. And generally, it's incredibly humiliating and embarrassing for most people. And so those are the kind of consequences we're looking at legally. What are some things that you might be concerned about with your kids sexting using your electronic devices or devices that are in your home? Anybody have?
If you're the owner, a registered owner of that electronic device, and you're doing that on your device, you're going to be responsible.
Yeah, how? You're exactly right. What are some of the consequences potentially?
They're going to think you're the pedophile.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. A lot of cases come into the police department from who? Geek Squad, right? What's a Geek Squad? That Best Buy, your computer crashes, it's got a virus on it because somebody in your house has been surfing porn. No, that's probably not why. But you take your virus to your computer-infected virus computer to the Best Buy. Geek Squad starts going through it, fixing it, looking for the virus, and they find images of your child naked or in a sexually compromising position. What does Geek Squad have to do by law? Mandatory reporting. Call 911. We've got a guy here whose computer has explicit images of children on it. Police come and pick it up. You've just lost your device at a bare minimum. That's the best thing that happens to you in this scenario, right? And then there's a full investigation into you as the owner of this device and how that image got on there. And if it's not abundantly clear that it was a sexting scenario with your kid or their friends, that is not a position you want to be in as a parent, right? So, you may or may not want to tell your kids that. Depends on how much they love and respect you, right? If you're at odds with your child right now, don't give them any ideas about how to get you in a lot of trouble. But most kids, I think, would be generally very responsive to the fact that, hey, if you take a nudie and it gets found, if people find it, I'm going to go to jail. Do you want that? When they say yes, then you got concerns. But what else? Yeah.
You're going to talk about this, but what if you're an innocent recipient of
Good. So what if you receive an unsolicited nudie? As an adult or a child, what should you do? Unwanted, unsolicited. As a child, what do you do? Yeah, hopefully. What do they normally do? Pass it around to their friends, laugh about it, delete it, and hopefully nobody ever finds out. That's how most kids think. That's the reality of it. What are the consequences of that? It's out there. Yeah, once the picture's out there, it's out there. Somebody's going to find out, then everybody's going to find out, and then, then you got to deal with the legal consequences, the social consequences, all that. What should you do? What should a child do? What should a parent do if they discover unsolicited? Good question. The law says if it's unsolicited, you should report it so that there's a record that you have unsolicited stuff on your device or your child's device. Let the police delete it and record it and document. Now, I don't know about you, but a lot of people are really uncomfortable with having the police document that you've got essentially pornographic images on your child's device or your device. A lot of people aren't really comfortable with that. My feeling is, personally, it's actually not a bad idea to have that documented, because if down the road some other allegations were to come, you could show, no, this has happened before. My kid, does this thing that we're trying to nip it in the bud and do it, whatever. So you're supposed to report it, delete it and report it, okay? So that's, especially if it involves more than one child, or if there's other parties involved, if there's potentially the chance for re-victimization. Because how often these days are videos and pictures actually stored on the device itself? What do you think? Yeah, mostly it's cloud. Everything's cloud-based these days. So there may be a version of it on the device, but almost everything syncs to the cloud.
If you open the image on your phone, it's in the memory.
That's right. It's gonna be in the cache, right? So, and this is just, I don't want to get too technical, but in your phone or your tablet or your mobile device, right? Anytime you open or access any file, it usually goes into a cache folder, C-A-C-H-E, right? A cache folder that's related to that app, which is stored in a different place on the file system, right? So you may go in and delete all your photos and videos and everything that's accessible to you as an end user, but the reality of it is that there's another version of that file somewhere else in a systems folder or an app folder that's kind of buried and less accessible to you as the end user, especially if it's an Apple product. Apple products, for all of their greatness, are not very accessible to the end user in the ins and outs of the operating system. Android, a little more accessible to the end user. You might be able to get in and find it and delete it. So anyway, great questions. Yeah, other?
What's the legal definition of juvenile, age-wise?
Under 18.
Oh, okay, so that basically means anybody in high school.
That's right. Yep, anybody under 18 is a juvenile. Okay? Identifying a juvenile in a sexually exploitative position can be very difficult unless you know the identity of the juvenile. The courts are very conservative about saying this person is a child, which unfortunately protects the bad guys in this case, right? I can't tell you how many cases I've done where it is obvious to me that the victim in the picture is an 11-year-old girl or boy. You can just tell by their build, their face, like any normal, reasonable person would look at that and go, that's an 11-year-old being exploited, being raped, whatever. You take it to a doctor to get a professional opinion so you can admit that into court, and if there's any sexual development, and I don't want to be too explicit here, but any developing of the genitals, any budding of the breasts, any hair, any body hair, they will say, well, we can't say definitively that that person's under 18 because they've got adult features, right? So the child, the person in the picture literally has to be a child with zero prepubescent, or else, unless we know the age of that person, we've identified that victim. So it's very difficult. That's one of the things we're up against when it comes to sexual predators, is they've got that advantage. So, any other thoughts, questions? Yeah.
Let's ask a real quick question.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying resource officers aren't doing their job.
Yeah.
But it seems to me like there's a lot of, that's pretty rampant in addition to, smoking on campus,
Right.
vaping.
Right.
They're just getting so creative with being able to use. So what is the interaction with the resource officer? Where do they get their intel? Are they talking to kids? Are they sitting behind a desk? Are they describing the control?
Yeah. The question is, are the school resource officers doing their job or not? And truthfully, they're not. And that's no dig on the school resource officers. It's because they're overwhelmed. They're out there doing their job, but it's a drop in the bucket compared to what's going on. When I was a school resource officer, for example, I'd go have lunch with the kids every day, and I'd move from table to table just talking to them and seeing what's going on. And that's how I learned all this stuff, because they thought I was real cool and they told me all their secrets, right? And then I made presentations and told their parents. It's really, yeah.
What's a school resource officer? Is it a police officer?
police officer, it's a sworn police officer. For example, I believe here at Hamilton it's a Chandler police officer who's assigned by the police department and has an agreement with the school district to have him on campus. He's got an office here, he patrols campus, he looks for, he tries to... Oh yeah. Okay. Yep.
Are they in middle school as well?
Yes. It depends, but what's that?
Is there just one on each campus?
If that. Many campuses don't have them. It just depends on, again, there's a financial agreement, an intergovernmental agency agreement between the school district and the police department, and depending on the amount of funding that the school district has, they put the cops in the most high-risk areas. Yeah. It's all about money. It's all about resources. We're up against the wall that we just can't possibly combat, right? I've heard it, well, never mind, I almost got political. All right. This is an advertisement from Snapchat's page, their web page a couple of years ago, where they're showing these two girls. Can you tell that those two girls are wearing swimsuits? If I hadn't covered this one up with the Snapchat icon, you would be able to see a little bit of the top of her bikini with loads of skin above it. And I'm in marketing now. I understand sex sells to some degree. It's, everybody knows that and everybody probably uses it to some degree. But this is marketing an app towards middle schoolers. And it is very ambiguous about whether or not these models are wearing clothing. Now, of course, everything's covered up, but it leaves a lot to the imagination, or not much. Here they're telling you, oh, you can set your snap to just a few seconds. So you can send anything and it'll disappear on the other person's phone after 7 seconds. That's what they're implying right here, right? So Kristen can send Derek a nudie and in 7 seconds it'll disappear. What's the problem with that? Two problems with that. What's that? Screenshot. Yeah, screenshot. Even with my clunky Samsung Android, if I get a Snapchat from one of my kids that I think is really funny, I just swipe with the side of my hand and it puts it right into my pictures folder, right? And there are other apps out there that will actually, they're Snapchat catchers, right? So if you've got a Snapchat catch on there, it automatically catches everything that they send you, so that's one problem. What's the other problem?
So that it'll do that, so that
right.
It doesn't notify the other person.
That's right.
Did the screenshot of the snap.
Yeah, if you do a screenshot, it does tell the person. That's true.
Now that'll save the image
without notifying. That's right. That's right. That's right.
Once you send a picture over internet, cellular service, it's out there.
What?
Server, it's something.
What? Yeah, it is. Did you? I remember a few years ago there was the story of the FBI. I think it was FBI. Might have been Secret Service. I forget who did the investigation, but they actually had to shut down Snapchat for a while, and they seized their servers and confiscated thousands of illicit pornographic images of minors from the Snapchat servers. They weren't deleting them. They were keeping them. This is an app invented by college boys, So yeah, I've obscured these Snapchat images, which are available online. All you have to do is Google Snapchat captures, and there's all these lovely young girls exposed and naked, sending Snapchat images to presumably their boyfriends or somebody, and they all have text messages that I've covered up you can't see. They say things like, "Don't you share this with anybody." I found it on Google. Yeah. Guys, geez. Men are we're such a bunch of pigs. It's true. All right. So have a discussion with your kids about Snapchat and using it wisely. And is there a really good chance, even if you're a great parent and you're really involved with your kids and you have this discussion, that they're still going to be tempted to use it stupidly? Yeah, there is. And that's where we have an opportunity as parents to walk our kids through a painful but valuable learning experience. And so many parents are banning Snapchat. Again, I respect that, but I caution that just because you ban it doesn't mean they're not using it somehow, somewhere, because the social pressure to have Snapchat is overwhelming. Absolutely overwhelming. All right, this is the problem with Snapchat and like apps is, and again, my PowerPoint didn't work. It was supposed to be an animation, but it just popped up there denied. When your kids are graduated from high school, and this is a hard conversation to have with a person that doesn't have a developed prefrontal cortex, right? If they can't really foresee more than 5 minutes from now, it's really hard to have a conversation about 5 years from now, but have it anyway, okay? When they're sitting across, here's a true story. 15-year-old girl out of high school up in Scottsdale makes an 8-second video for her boyfriend where she does something sensual with a hairbrush. And it's very obvious in this video chat that she does with her boyfriend. Her boyfriend, whom she thought was 19, which is, that's pretty much a felony anyway on his part if he's engaging in sexual activity with her, receives the video, screen captures it, and then shares it on adult pornographic sites catering to pedophiles. Turns out he's actually not 19, he's like 29, and he's got 2 toddlers of his own, he's married, and we caught him and put him in jail, but now we've got this girl, 15-year-old, who's devastated. She thought she was sharing something intimate with somebody that cared about her, and this guy's a complete a-hole, right? Well, here's the sad thing, and this is the conversation you got to have with your kids, because again, I don't necessarily need to be moralistic about this. Straight A student, honors classes, by all accounts of all the adults I talked to. She could have been anything she wanted. She could have been a doctor, a lawyer, an astrophysicist, whatever. What did she want to do with her life? What was her life's ambition and dreams? She wanted to be an elementary school teacher. Okay? Now, as this gentleman said, once it's out there, it's out there. Can we ever get it back? We can't. And now, that's been probably almost 5 or 10 years ago. She's probably 20 or 22 now. And she's probably finished college, and she's probably looking for her first job, and she's probably sitting across the desk from a principal at an elementary school where she really wants to work. And if they're using facial recognition software or other advanced internet social media searches, and they find this picture or video of her diddling her hairbrush, are they going to hire her to work with children? Probably not, unless every other candidate also has like videos out there, which these days is possible, but the chance of actually getting that job are slim. And that's what I try to tell kids when I give this presentation, because I don't give them all the gory details that I just gave you, but it's really, really hard to compete if you've got something questionable out there that suggests maybe you don't have the ability to think forward. Question?
So today I just read this article about the teen boy in Chicago that committed suicide after having a sexual image and he was caught at school.
Yeah.
And he had a bright future ahead of him.
Yeah.
So do you recommend telling your kids, like, this is the possible consequences? Like, other than you're not going to be able to get a job, but...
Yeah, not getting a job, again, like you just pointed out with her story, is do we tell our kids about the potential for suicide and the high level of suicide associated with harassment related to sexual images? Absolutely, right? And again, whether or not they can actually comprehend and project is one thing, but it doesn't hurt to tell them. We have an epidemic of kids committing suicide over their social image. Now, it's not all related to sexually explicit images. It's not all about bullying, but it's some combination of this pressure to live up to something socially that they feel like they're not living up to. And social media has definitely raised the bar for our kids. They're trying to compete. I've heard it said, we, and adults too, we are all trying to compete our real selves against everyone else's social media self. Right? Most of us generally don't project our full real persona out there, right? Nobody wants to know, trust me, right? We put our best foot forward, we project the good parts of our life, everybody else sees how wonderful our lives are, and I'm comparing my miserable reality, not that my reality is always miserable, but if I'm having a bad day and I see everyone else's life is perfect on social media, what does that do to you psychologically when you're 13? As an adult, we can probably handle that to some degree. although a lot of adults are dealing with depression and anxiety issues too, but kids their anxiety and depression is going through the ceiling. I happen to know 2 counselors very well who deal with teens with anxiety and depression disorders, and a lot of it's related to social media and pornography and comparing themselves to others. So that's a danger. Let's talk a little bit, I have to kind of talk a little bit about brain chemistry and brain science just to frame this context for you, because I think the stigma is leaving. I think the idea that pornography is just a morality issue is kind of starting to leave the social consciousness. I think we're waking up a little bit and realizing that there's a little bit more to it than that. Not that, again, I do have moralistic views on some level, but we have to talk about it from an evidentiary perspective. That's what I like about being a cop. It's all about the evidence, right? What's dopamine?
Feel good.
The feel good. Where does it come from? Your brain, right? Your brain produces dopamine, right? That's the little dopamine molecule. It's great stuff. Love dopamine. I'm definitely a dopamine addict. Let's see, come on. All right. What causes your brain to produce dopamine? Things that are good for you generally, right? Eating, right? Pizza, dopamine. That's yeah. Oreos, dopamine. That's winning. Why are guys attracted to sports? Why do we want to sit home on Monday night all night and say, shut up, watch? Why? Because we win vicariously with our team. We feel adrenaline, we feel dopamine, right? Physical affection, obviously, causes a dump of dopamine. Laughing. Kids get this. Talk to your 13-year-old. Why are they such idiots? Because they love to laugh. That's their natural high. They act. Why do they love Vine? What's Vine? Anybody watch Vine? Right? The dumbest videos on the planet. And your kids are addicted to it. Right? It's the most stupid, what is it, 9 seconds? 15 seconds? What is it? 7 seconds. That's right. The most stupid 7 seconds of video you will ever watch, ever. And my kids love it. They're addicted to it. They laugh themselves hysterical. Why? Oops. Gosh, I'm bad at this. I should present more often. Okay, I've just ruined it. They do it because of dopamine. They like that feel-good drug that their own brain produces. So it gets dangerous, though, when you discover that there are certain activities and chemicals that cause an inordinate dump of dopamine in the brain, right? Sexual activity, sexual intimacy, orgasm causes a massive dopamine rush. And in a healthy, intimate relationship between 2 mature people who are emotionally equipped to deal with sexual intimacy, there's also other drugs of the brain, hormones that are dumped in there that create bonding and true intimacy, and it's great. Drugs like weed and alcohol, they are a kind of a facsimile of dopamine. They have their own version of dopamine that shuts down your dopamine production and replaces it with drugs or alcohol. Gambling. Winning at gambling is one of the biggest dopamine rushes you can get. Dump dopamine from winning at gambling, or even from the thrill of possibly winning at gambling. Social popularity, just that you get on Snapchat or Twitter and you see how many people liked your last post. This is more for girls and boys, but boys feel it too, right? Oh my gosh, I got 6 likes, I got 6 follows, I got 6 retweets. Oh my gosh, and they're just like elated, right? Dopamine. It's dopamine. Video games, right? My kids, I really am. I'm a horrible parent because I've got an 11-year-old and a 13-year-old that I allow them to have way too much screen time, and they are dopamine addicts, right? Because they can save the universe every day, all day. From the alien invasion or from Darth Vader or from whatever, they can go out and have this euphoric high of being the conquering hero, dopamine rush from video games, especially for boys who are very stimulated visually. Obviously hard drugs, oh, I did it again. But I'm just going to put this pointer down and just come over here and click on the... Pornography is a huge one. And pedophiles will use pornography to lure your very good, sensible child away from you. And this is what we found in the policing arena, is that pedophiles almost invariably use pornography to lure kids away from you and the safety of your home. And they do that because pornography is a huge cause of a massive dopamine dump, right? For boys especially, but also for girls. You get adrenaline, you get dopamine by watching sexually explicit material. Your brain fires up, you start shaking, your heart starts beating, you start breathing hard. Everything about dopamine squared, right? I mean, it's a huge rush for young boys and girls, and for adults too, obviously. And you couple that with, a little personal sexual exploration, and you've got basically a 1-2 hit of dopamine and oxytocin, which is the equivalent of a 1-2 hit of cocaine and heroin. And it's brain chemistry. It's brain chemistry. And we got to be careful, I think this is my opinion, we have to be careful about demonizing pornography, because there are some cultures, my culture included, that tend to demonize pornography and make it to be so bad that nobody even wants to talk about it, to the other side where we totally validate its widespread use. So we've got to find that middle ground and say, we got to talk about it and understand it from a scientific perspective. We've got to understand that it's a brain chemistry issue, that in your 13-year-old boy, he's not a bad person for being curious about porn, and he's not a bad person for having an obsessive compulsion to look at it. It's not a matter of moral character. It's a matter of brain chemistry. Your child who looks at porn frequently is addicted to dopamine. And that's just the reality of it. There's a lot of science out there. I don't have any sources up here. I invite you to go and look up some of this stuff. But it's not junk science. There's real science out there that demonstrates that pornography is brain chemistry. And pedophiles somehow know this. And they will exploit your child and get them very interested in sexuality by sharing porn with them over a little bit here, a little bit there, until your kid's addicted and really curious, right? Because the thing about most addictions, and this isn't going to work, I think, but you've got neuroreceptors in your brain that receive the dopamine that your brain shoots out. And the receptors are like the catchers, and the dopamine's like the baseballs, which aren't going to animate in this presentation, probably because of the way it's set up. But when you get too much dopamine, when your brain gets too much dopamine, usually from massive amounts of pornography, your brain doesn't shut down dopamine production. It keeps producing the same amount of dopamine. Even though it's setting off all these red flags, it's going, hey, there's too much dopamine. We're not supposed to be this happy. This is dangerous, right? And so instead of shutting down dopamine, it shuts down the receptors. So instead of, 1,000 catchers out there catching dopamine, it reduces it down to a few hundred catchers. And so now they're engaging in the same exact behavior they were a week ago, they're not getting the same euphoric rush or high that they were. Right? What's that called when we talk about drugs? Tolerance. We develop a tolerance for the drug use. That's what's happening in your brain. And it happens with pornography and other dangerous things. So in order to maintain that same level of stimulus or that same level of euphoric high, you have to increase the amount of stimulation. You have to increase the kind of stimulation, the variety of stimulation, and you have to do it a lot. And that's where the addictive behavior comes in. And once a pedophile has your child addicted to pornography, then it becomes very easy for them to manipulate your child and get them out of your house. Okay? So it's just like drug trafficking. It's just like drug trafficking. You all heard about the drug traffickers who give away the first couple joints or the first couple hits. Why do they do that? Once you're hooked. Then you'll come and you'll do anything for it, right? You'll do anything for that stimulus. Pedophiles are the same way. They give out free porn, they give you a little taste of it here and there, and when you're 13 or 14, now you're really curious, now you're really ramped up, and you are willing to believe that this person loves you and that they care about you when really all they want to do is exploit you. So that's what we're talking about. Brain chemistry. This is a brain on cocaine, right? A person on cocaine whose dopamine has been shut off and replaced with cocaine. We see a little bit of brain activity here at the back of the brain, down deep near the stem and in the emotional centers of the brain where the cocaine takes over, and none up here in the prefrontal cortex, right? The thinking part of the brain, the higher order part of the brain, the part of the brain that understands cause and effects, understands consequence. That's called a dopaminergic response, where your brain actually becomes temporarily damaged, and the pathways between the lower part of the brain and the upper part of the brain stop working, and all you can think about is getting that next hit of dopamine, or in this case cocaine, but it works exactly the same way. This is what a normal brain looks like. Lots of blood flow, lots of energy on all areas of the brain. And the crazy thing is it's the prefrontal cortex that you need to overcome an addiction. Any addiction, right? And that's the thing that makes addiction so difficult to beat, is because the part of your brain that you need to stop the addiction has been shut down by the addiction, right? It's kind of a catch-22. That's why you need therapists. That's why you need maybe some kind of other intervention to help work your kid through this, because they're not bad people if they have a porn addiction. Yeah?
Same sort of thing happens with alcoholism?
I'm not an expert in alcoholism, but my understanding is that there is a similar response, right? You go to the pleasure center, you go to the pleasure-inducing behavior, and it stops the higher level thinking. Does anybody else know specifically things? I'm regurgitating stuff a lot smarter, people a lot smarter than me have researched and pointed out. So, but I find it very interesting. I find it very interesting that the part of your brain you need to overcome is the part that's shut down. So I guess as one parent to another, I'm pleading with you to talk to your kids about pornography, talk to them about sexting, talk to them about sexual predators, to ask them, what apps are you using? Okay? Look at their phones, look at their tablets, look at their iPods, whatever they're using, look at them and see what apps are on there. Now, what do you do if you find apps that you don't know what they are?
You ask them, you research it?
Absolutely. Ask your kids, what's this app? Who here is aware of knows about the calculator app? We've all heard of it, right? What's the calculator app? It's a vault, right? What is that?
It means that it looks like just a regular calculation application, but beneath it, you can access it via a passcode, some undesirable information.
Yeah. So your kid has a calculator app, and you're like, well, that's innocuous. That looks great, right? You can actually use the calculator app. Add, subtract, multiply, divide, but you put in the passcode, and it becomes a storage file where you can store all kinds of information, pictures, videos, etc. Right? So that's just one of the things. How do you learn about this stuff? Where do you go to find out about it? I mean, you can come here, but do I know every app that's out there? I don't. Honestly, I don't. What do I use when I find apps on my kids? By the way, I have a policy with my kids, right? Their phones and their tablets and their laptops come into my bedroom every night at 10 o'clock, where I plug them into the docking station and lay awake all night watching that little blue light flash. Yeah, it's awesome. But I'm trying to keep my kids safe, right? So they don't get to keep their media or their devices in their room overnight. Just, again, I don't judge them. I'm not saying they're bad kids. I'm just saying I know what I would do if I was 13 and I had an iPod with Wi-Fi, right? Of course, there's other strategies you can do too. What about things like Clean Router or Disney Circle? What are those? Anybody ever heard of those? Yeah, so these are hardware devices that you can plug into your router, your internet router that comes in from Cox or CenturyLink or whatever, and through that piece of hardware you can have absolute parental control over every device that ever connects to it. Now, does that protect your kid outside your house? Of course not, no. But it's Clean Router is one option. Disney Circle for Apple products is another one. There's a whole bunch out there. We didn't answer the question though. You find an app that you don't know what it is. Okay, here's two resources I use all the time. SafeSmartSocial.com. I think it's a .com. SafeSmartSocial.com. It's an idea I had 10 years ago and was too lazy to complete. Some really good guy beat me to it. He did a great job. He reviews every app you can possibly think of. He also reviews movies, video games, and puts out there for parents what it is and what it does. The pros and cons. What's good about it, what's potentially dangerous about it. Okay? He's not a fear monger, he's not a, he's just pretty realistic. So, SafeSmartSocial.com. There's another one that I really like called Common Sense Media. CommonSenseMedia.org. Find an app that you don't know what it is, you're going to find it probably on one of those two websites. If it's not on one of those two websites, they have contact me forms that you can fill out and say, hey, I need to know about this app. What is it? And they will research it for you. Now you might have to wait a couple of weeks or maybe months, but do your own research too. But it's an amazing library of knowledge for apps, games, etc. So those would be my strongest recommendation, because so-called experts like me, there's no way we can know everything, even when we've got 6 kids. In fact, I'm brain damaged from my 6 kids. I can't remember anything, so that's... So again, talking about luring, if I'm a bad guy, if I'm a pedophile, if I have a proclivity towards sexual attraction with children, okay, I'm definitely going to use Vine and Whisper and Kick and every other app that's out there that I can think of to reach out to kids. At the back of the Scottsdale Police Department, we had only one detective dedicated to prevention of child crimes against children. She would pose as a 14-year-old girl, go out into chat rooms, use social media, and it was usually within a week, she would have an adult male trying to solicit her for sexual activity. And that was really fun. We'd do sting operations, and we'd have him meet her at a park, and then we'd jump on him and help him into our police car, and we were very kind and gentle about that. But that's the kind of stuff that's out there. She produced more work than we could actually handle, and more work than she could handle, because she had other sources of reports coming into her about sexually exploited children. So those are the kind of apps that we're seeing. Now, this is old school news. This is probably not something I even need to say here, but why is it a good idea to be on social media with your kids? If your kid's on Twitter, should you be on Twitter? Absolutely. Why?
Because you know what he or she's putting out there.
You know what he or she's putting out there.
Can't they block you though?
They can. If they do, that's a clue. Yeah, right? True story. 5 years ago, my sister's daughter lived with us for about 5 years. And when she was 16, she said, Uncle Frank, I've got a job. I've got good grades and I've got a part-time job, and I can afford my own smartphone and my own plan. Can I get one? And my wife and I talked about it, and we decided, good learning opportunity. We'll have our data contract, our screen time contract. We'll talk about it with her, and we'll monitor it. So she got her iPhone, and she got her own data plan, and I was pretty strict with her about stuff. And my wife, thank goodness for my wife, because she was the social media Nazi. She was, every night take the phone and go through everything on all the kids' phones, looking at everything. And one night she found, this wasn't, she was just she's on her own phone decided to look up Twitter handles for all of our kids and see if she could find them. Well, my niece, contrary to our agreement, had created a Twitter handle. And she had a Twitter account. And she had blocked my wife. My wife tried to friend request her, and it said, you've been blocked. So that was a clue, right? So talked to my niece, said, what's going on? Well, we watched it for a couple days first, because what my niece didn't know is that you could still log into the Twitter webpage, and if you knew the person's Twitter handle, you could watch them and follow them without having them approve you. Right? Twitter's not like that anymore. The privacy settings are a little tighter. But back then, we could do that. And we could also plug her Twitter handle into Bing Maps, and we could see where she did all of her tweets when she did them. So it would actually appear, she didn't turn off geolocation. She had geolocation on. And she tweeted a lot, and it was right about a time when there was a little bit of tension between her and us, and she said some very choice things about her aunt and uncle on Twitter. She was just putting it out there for the whole world, which we kind of expected. We weren't too shocked by that. But the most alarming thing to us is that there were about 4,000 tweets in a week right around our house. In fact, right on top of our house. And then there were a trail of tweets from our house to the high school. And there were about 8,000 tweets there at the high school. And then there were a trail of tweets from the high school to where she worked at Chick-fil-A. And there were about 4,000 tweets there. And then so we could see the triangle of where she was, when she was, and what she was saying, what she was doing at all of those times. And we were blocked. We weren't even allowed to follow her. Right, so we had a very good opportunity to educate her about how to hide your tracks better. Is that good? Is that a good idea as a parent? It's a double-edged sword. What's the danger if we tell her, turn off your geolocating, we're watching everything you're doing, you idiot? I didn't say it like that. I can't watch her now. But what's the good news? Neither can the pedophiles, neither can the bad guys, neither can the stalkers, neither can the goofy boys at school who want to do, who knows what, right? So, you got to educate your kids about Twitter. If you're going to have a Twitter account, turn off the geolocate in the app. You don't want it to project where you are every time you tweet something. Kids don't
go back retroactive to get rid of the ones before.
Nope.
So it's only moving forward.
That's right. Well, at least back then. This was a few years ago. So, and now I've got kids that use Twitter. It's time for me to go back and check and make sure their geolocate's safe. But their privacy settings on Twitter are a little better now than they were 5 years ago. So you got to be aware of how much your kids are putting out there, because my 16-year-old niece didn't think about bad guys looking for her. And as it turns out, guess what? There were no bad guys looking for her, right? What's the actual statistic of the ratio of bad guys to kids? Does anybody know? We don't know. We don't think it's very high. But do you want to take the chance, right? What's that old saying? If you and your friends are hiking through the woods and a bear chases you, do you have to be faster than the bear?
You have to be faster than the other.
You have to be faster than your friend, right? The slowest friend, that's right. You have to be faster than the slowest friend, and that's a little morbid, but the point is, right, if your kid is a little bit safer than most of the other kids out there, the chance that your kid's going to become a victim to a predator is much slimmer. That probably doesn't give you a lot of peace and comfort, but that's the truth. That's the reality of it. If you take measures to be safe and to make yourself a little bit harder target, then the chances of you become or your child being victimized are dramatically decreased, right? So here's a good question to ask your kid, and it's just a hypothetical. Out of every 100 people, let's say I just did a random grab of 100 people out of the city of Phoenix or Maricopa County or whatever. I grabbed 100 people and put them in a room. What percentage of them would be bad guys? Murderers, pedophiles, sociopaths, psychopaths. What do you think? 1 or 2 maybe? Yeah, and again, and my colleagues who are sociologists or social workers trained a little bit in that. They said that's about right. That's what the experts estimate about. Would you say that's right? 1 or 2% sociopathic, psychopathic tendencies? That's what kind of the average statistic is right now. So that doesn't sound too bad. 1 or 2 out of every 100 people. That makes you feel pretty safe, right? Yeah? How many people live within a 1-hour drive of your house if you live here in Maricopa County? About 4.6 million people live within a 1-hour drive of your house. What's 1% of 4.6 million? 46,000. 46,000 bad guys, perverts, pedophiles, sociopaths, potentially live within a 1-hour drive here. That's a small city, right? Are they looking for your kid? Not specifically, but if your kid's really dumb and she's tweeting all over the place and doesn't turn off her geolocate, is she more likely going to be a target than not? Yeah, so teach your kids to be smart and just outrun the other dumb kids. Stalking can happen through Twitter, right? Like I just said. If your kids are putting a lot of stuff out there on Snapchat, Twitter, Instagram, what are some discussions you want to have about your kids? Let's put ourselves in the shoes of a bad guy. If you're a bad guy and you live near Hamilton High School, right? And you've got an Instagram account or a Twitter account, what are you going to do? What are you going to start looking for? Kids that go to Hamilton High School, can you do a search? Yeah. Can you do a geo search in Twitter and Instagram? Yeah, I mean, that's part of the feature of it now. They want, hey, so-and-so is close by, now we can go hang out. It's a fun, really harmless feature, right? Not necessarily, not if there's a pedophile living in your neighborhood who likes, 13-year-old girls or 14-year-old girls or boys, right? Because now all I have to do is go into my Instagram account and look and see who's near me on Instagram or Twitter. And it becomes very easy to stalk somebody in real time using these apps, right? If the geolocate feature is a lot of fun for kids, but potentially very dangerous if there's pedophiles out there looking for them, okay? Now let's say they click on your kid's profile and it's not set to private because as much as we tell our kids set it to private, right? Only allow your close circle of friends in, that's no fun. Why do they want everybody in the universe to know who they are and where they are on Instagram? Likes, followers, right? The more likes and followers you have, the cooler you are, the more dopamine you get, right? So they're using Twitter and Instagram, Snapchat. Snapchat has that feature now too, right? Geo. And so if I'm a pedophile, I'm going to click on the location marker. It's going to pull up your kid's account. I'm going to scroll through it. I'm going to see where they go to high school. Does your kid have pictures on Instagram of her high school or his high school? Is it discernible? Can you tell by the pictures what high school it is? Do you have a picture of your kid in his football uniform or her volleyball uniform or her cheerleader outfit on Instagram or Twitter or Snapchat on their story? Is it out there? Because if I'm a bad guy, I now know that your child is a cheerleader at Hamilton High School. And I can just go to the high school on game night, sit in the stand and watch your kid. Right, that hurt. I'm old, okay. Yeah. But that's how bad guys are stalking kids and finding them. They're also befriending them and grooming them slowly over time to develop their trust. But if because most of them are not initially violent people. The pedophile sociology is they generally start out passive, very passive aggressive. They're trying to win your kid's trust. It's part of their game that they want to feel gratified by gaining your kid's trust. And they're generally not going to be the drive by, throw them in a van, take them off and rape them. It happens, that does happen, but the kind of pedophile MO that I'm familiar with is grooming over time, slowly. It's the thrill of the hunt. Live gaming. Who here has teenage boys? Yeah? Live gaming, what are your thoughts on it? Minecraft, totally safe, right? Why not?
Because they pose as 11-year-olds, 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds, and they can talk lingo, and then before you know it.
Yeah.
That's one thing I told my son, because he wants to go into the military. And so I told him, be careful what you put out there, because once it's out there, it's always out there.
That's right.
You can't erase it. But also what you say about yourself or gaming or things like that, because they will research that, they will get all that, and then you might be screwed.
Yeah, your career could be seriously damaged. Yeah, but if I'm a pedophile interested in kids, where's the playground? Xbox Live, PS4 Live, whatever. Yeah, this is the place to go.
Their child's trusted and meet them at conventions.
Yeah, they can meet them at the GameStop down the street. They can meet them at the gaming conventions. They can meet them wherever they want. Now, I gave this presentation, this is a few years ago. I'm sitting there talking to a bunch of teenage boys and girls. I'm like, dudes, the pedophiles who are into little boys like you are hanging out playing Modern Warcraft. Or what's it called? Modern Warfare. Modern Warfare, or World of Warcraft, or Halo, or back in the day, whatever it was. They're the Minecraft, right? It doesn't matter. They're out there playing it, and they're acting like kids your age, right? And they're going to tell you, "Oh, I'm 18." Well, and that might freak you out a little bit. You're like, "Dude, you're an adult. What are you doing talking to me?" Well, I was a teenager. I'm a teenager like you. I was a kid last year, right? Is he really 18? No, he's probably 28, living in his mom's basement still, But he's out there talking to your kids, and I told these young men this, and they laughed at me, and they're like, dude, Officer Griffiths, that's not how it works. You can tell the creepers because they're the only people out there that are nice to you. Everyone else is talking trash. I'm like, that's a very astute observation. That's very good. But do you think after the pedophile gets burned the first time, he's not going to figure that out? Yeah, of course. I mean, these guys, these creepy pedophile guys, they're not stupid. They're going to figure it out. You talk trash, right? You play in the arena with them for a few weeks, and now you're their buddy. Now you meet them at GameStop. Now you meet them at the game fair, whatever. Yeah, so that's where we got to be careful is, letting our kids go out unsupervised in the World Wide Web gaming area. Now, maybe the creeper's in New York. But maybe he's an hour drive in Glendale, or Florence, or Flagstaff, or Tucson. Maybe he's close. How long does it take a pedophile to get here from Flagstaff? What do you think? 3 hours. Yeah, about 2.5, 3 hours.
5, 6.
5 or 6 hours. Yeah. We caught one guy that drove 3 days nonstop to be able to get here in 18 hours. Yeah, we intercepted him, but he was on his way. He was here. He was from New York, coming to meet some kid that he met online, right? These guys, if they think they've got fresh meat, they're on it. That's part of the hunt. That's exciting. They will drive 3 days straight with no sleep. I don't know if they're doing meth or just Monster Energy drinks. I don't know, but whatever, it works. So this is an old slide, but I think it probably holds true today. You can go to familywatchdog.org or .us, familywatchdog.us. You can also go to arizonadps.gov and type in registered sex offenders, and they'll show you a map on here so you can see how many registered sex offenders live near your area. You're going to develop a false sense of security living in an affluent area like here or North Scottsdale. There's not a ton of pedophiles, generally registered sex offenders in the neighborhood. Okay, most of them live downtown Phoenix or in other demographically, less affluent areas. That's by the airport, about a 5 6 mile radius of the airport, and all those little confetti dots are various kinds of sex offenders. The red ones are offenses against children. The yellow ones are rapists. Blue and green are, battery and other sexual offenses. So that just goes to show you that's a few pedophiles. That's a few registered sex offenders, right? 40.
That's only registered.
Those are the registered ones.
There are a lot.
Those are the ones that we've caught. convicted, and who are currently registered. Not the ones who we don't know about or who have absconded from their registration process, from their parole, right? So this is where I tell parents and kids, it is time to be reasonably paranoid, right? Now, what's the difference between paranoia and reasonable paranoia? Here's my demonstration of paranoia. Okay, you're going to get a kink in your neck. That hurts. Don't do that, right? But reasonable paranoia, it looks a little different. That's where you walk in the room and you just kind of look at everybody. When you got your kids with you, you're walking through the mall, you're just kind of looking at everybody, making eye contact, seeing who's out there, what their behavior is, what they're doing. Maybe occasionally look over your shoulder, right? Be aware of your surroundings, because there's a lot of those guys out there. There's a lot of them out there. So that's the end of the sexual predation. That's where I spent most of my time in talking about those apps. Where are we out of time?
5 minutes.
Over? We're over now, or we have 5 minutes?
5 minutes.
We have 5 more minutes. All right, so does anybody have any questions, comments, or concerns about anything we've talked about up to this point? So what are the two question-ish, something, comment-ish, yeah?
We use this Life 360 app just to keep track of where our daughter is. Is that's self-contained, that's not giving information out to other people?
That's a great question. I know that there are Google. Is that a Google app or is that a different one? Yeah, because I don't remember. But yeah, Google has an app now where, and I used to do this. There was an app called Glimpse, Glymps, and you install it on both phones. And this was my oldest daughter's and my niece when she lived at home. You know, the boys would come to pick her up for a date, and I would always meet them at the door, usually wearing my badge and gun, and say, "Hi, nice to meet you. I'm Leandra's uncle. Do you have a driver's license?" "Yes, sir. Of course I have a driver's license." "May I see it?" "Oh, sure." And they hand me the driver's license. I take a picture of it. I hand it back to them. You know, a little over vigilant perhaps. "Is this your car?" "Yeah." "No, it's my parents' car." "Oh, okay." And I'd like to take a picture of the license plate. And, you know, very overprotective uncle and father. But I would also say to my daughter or my niece, make sure you have Glimpse installed on your phone. And if I text you throughout the night and ask for a glimpse, send me a glimpse. And it's the same thing as the 360 Live, where it sends you a geo update of their location, and in real time you can see where they're going. And I use it, and my daughters, I found, were actually very glad to have that technology, right? Because if they're out with a guy, maybe it's a first date or a second date, we don't know this guy really well yet. I mean, I have his license plate and his driver's license, but she calls me and says, "Hey, Dad, we have a small change of plans. You know, we're going to be home on time still, but we want to go to this location now." I say, "Great, send me a glimpse," right? And that way, I can tell if that was a distress call or if it was a secret call for help, or if she's just being transparent with me. I can see, okay, they're still driving where they're supposed to. They're going where they say they're going. And it gave my daughters a sense of, I think they felt a little creeped out sometimes that I was a little overprotective, but I think it really gave them a sense of security that, hey, I'm safe with this guy because my dad will hunt you down and kill you, right? So that's a thought, if you know, and always answer the door with your gun on. That would be my.
So those apps don't broadcast to people unless you let them.
I believe it is a direct connection to just one person.
That's my impression too.
Yeah. Again, social media, Safe Smart Social. Look it up. Yep. And commonsensemedia.org. Look them up. That's a great question that I don't have a detailed answer to.
If you suspect sexual predation, children or children's friends, what do you do? What are the first steps?
Okay, so again, what would be some of the signs that you might be looking for? Let's talk about that really quick. If you just suspect sexual predation, what are some of the things we're looking for?
Well, obviously, finding stuff on the phone.
Yeah, finding stuff on the phone would be a clear indicator, but often there's other indicators that pop up before that. Dramatic change in behavior, isolation, not wanting to be at I mean, this describes a lot of teenagers. Not wanting to hang out with the family as much anymore, being in their bedroom with the door closed all the time, not eating as much, or noticing drastic behaviors in their eating, drastic changes in their eating behavior. What am I missing, Rajani? What do you see this kind of stuff? What kind of behaviors are you looking for kids that are potentially abused? Not to put you on the spot, but
Anger, withdrawal.
yep. So yeah, outbursts of anger, things like that. Finding things. If you suspect abuse, first thing is just an open, honest, direct conversation with them. Right? That should be a given. Hey, tell me why you're feeling like this. Is anybody abusing you? Is anybody hurting you? I want you to know you're not in trouble. I want you to know that nothing you can tell me right now is going to change how I feel about you. I'm always going to love you. And you're not in any trouble. I'm just very concerned about your behavior. Is anybody hurting you? Is anybody threatening you? Is anybody, is anybody having sexual contact with you? Right? Really honest, direct discussions. Are they going to be honest with you 100% of the time? Probably not. But if you ask your child eye to eye, is anybody having sexual contact with you? What do they say? The face of a child says a lot, especially the mouth part of the face, right? But you can tell by looking in their eyes so often. And then, so I know what your real question is what do we do? Where are the resources? How do we go for help, right? If you can get hard evidence because you find information on the phone or the tablet or the laptop, okay? You want to call the police. If it's emergent, if it's exigent, right? You think that, oh my gosh, there's a text message or a chat message here that sounds like they're going to meet tonight or tomorrow. Okay, that's a 911 call. 911. Yeah, hello, what's your emergency? Well, I was going through my daughter's phone or my son's phone, and I observed a chat communication with an unknown person who I believe is an adult, and they are trying to meet with my kid tomorrow. That'll get a cop to your house pretty quick. They'll take a report, they'll take the phone, they may, if there's a lot of evidence, they may set up a sting operation, or they may just say, let's watch your kid really closely, right? The problem with these kinds of situations is the child, I say child, it's your teenager. He or she is often groomed so well to the point that they think that this person loves them. They are getting the kind of love and affection, attention that they are craving, and they feel important, they feel grown up, they feel accepted. And they're what we call a hostile victim. They don't want you to save them, right? And so that's the trick, is that they're being potentially exploited, and they will do everything they can to help the suspect. Yeah, so call the police, counseling, right? I teach a parenting class for new dads a couple times a month. It's a completely different topic, but I tell them a couple of things. Number one, don't put too much pressure on your sons as they grow up. And number two, since you're not going to listen to that advice, start saving now for therapy. Right? Same thing applies, right, with kids and the internet. So much good comes from the internet, but there's so much potential for life-changing, devastating trauma. It's rare. It rarely happens, but there's so much opportunity for it. Don't be ashamed to take your kid to counseling. Start with the school counselor. Get some referrals for other community counselors and resources. If you can't afford it, there are other options. But, I mean, I don't want to assume, but this is a good neighborhood. Parents, if you have the resources, don't be afraid to use counseling. I know there's a stigma still that goes along with that for some people. That's going away. Get the counseling involved. Go sit and talk with a counselor with your kids. You know, chances are you're doing something stupid as a parent. That's why they're in this situation. Chances are they're just kids exploring, but you got to be open to that, right? Does that make sense? As I've screwed up with my kids a lot with technology, I mean, I'm pretty hyperprotective, I'm pretty vigilant, I've still screwed up. You got to be willing to look at yourself in the mirror and go, what am I doing wrong? I got to figure this out. And we've been in counseling with our kids. I'm a so-called expert in this arena. I'll tell you what, there ain't no such thing. We're going to screw it up. We're all pioneers. Our parents didn't have 24/7 access to anything they wanted in the world, and neither did we growing up. We are literally pioneers in a digital age. We're going to screw it up. We don't have all the answers. And there's no shame in getting outside help. And you know, like I said, I'm preaching to the choir here. You guys are the good parents. You came here to learn about this tonight. But sometimes the good parents are the ones too that don't want to admit that we make mistakes, so we got to be careful about that. All right. Any other questions, comments, concerns? I think we're at 8 o'clock, aren't we? We didn't get to talk about bullying or harassment or other forms of exploitation, but we did cover the topics that we were supposed to cover tonight, I think. So, all right, pleasure.
Thank you.